The contact wasn't supposed to be there, not inside the carrier's inner ring, not this close. In the Combat Information Center, the air smelled like recycled conditioning and hot circuitry. Blue light washed over faces that hadn't seen the sky in hours. The radar scope was steady, clean tracks, predictable routes, until a thin, stubborn return blinked into existence on the edge of the display. New air contact. The radar operator locked the cursor on it, expecting it to dissolve into clutter. It didn't. Bearing 085, range 14 miles. No transponder data, no IFF response, no civilian squawk code, just a small signature moving with a purpose that didn't match the traffic picture. The operator ran the correlation check again, then again. A second console chimed. Another sensor had picked it up too. That meant it wasn't a ghost track. It wasn't weather. It wasn't a glitch you could shrug off with a reboot. The range ticked down. 13 miles. 12.8. 12.4. The track wobbled, then corrected itself. Not drifting, adjusting. A supervisor stepped behind the operator and leaned close enough to see the raw data feed. Confirm altitude. The operator's fingers moved fast, tapping filters, changing modes, stripping out sea clutter, tightening the gate. The contact held. Low altitude. Stable. Closing. Someone else in the room asked the question no one wanted to say out loud. Is it manned? No one answered. Because at this range, near a U.S. aircraft carrier, the difference didn't matter yet. Unknown was enough. Unknown meant the clock had already started. The CIC didn't explode into shouting. It tightened. Voices dropped. Movements became smaller, faster, sharper. Track is uncorrelated. Negative IFF. Recommend elevate status. On the display, concentric range rings wrapped the carrier icon like invisible walls. The contact crossed one ring, then another. Inside those boundaries, reaction time was measured in seconds, not minutes. The Air Defense Watch officer looked at the plotting board, then at the supervisor. Any emissions? None detected. That was its own kind of warning. A target that didn't talk, didn't squawk, didn't broadcast, forced you to guess its intent from behavior alone. The operator zoomed in and watched the vector line tighten toward the carrier's projected track. It wasn't screaming in at high speed. It wasn't wandering like a lost hobby drone either. It was doing something worse, approaching at a pace that kept decision-makers trapped between overreaction and hesitation. Possible small UAS, someone said. Could be civilian. Could be maritime launch. No one said enemy. No one said attack. Not yet. Because the rule wasn't to label the threat first. The rule was to not be wrong at carrier range. Update the air picture, notify strike. Prepare intercept. Above the CIC, the ship's pulse changed. The carrier began to turn into the wind, slow and deliberate, setting the deck for launches that might never happen. In the hangar bay and on the flight deck, crewmen moved with practiced speed, helmets on, goggles down, hands flashing signals in the roar of turbines and the slap of sea air. Ordnance crews rolled carts forward, not because anyone wanted to fire, because if the contact kept closing, the carrier's options would narrow until only action remained. Back in CIC, another range update came in. Contact now inside 10 miles. The supervisor didn't look away from the scope. Launch for visual, and in that moment, the carrier strike group shifted from watching the unknown to moving toward it. There were no alarms blaring through the ship, no dramatic announcement, just the deck coming alive. Jet blast deflectors rose like armored doors. A yellow shirt snapped a hand forward, then down. Launch sequence beginning. 2 fighters rolled into position, canopies sealed, engines winding from idle to a vibration you felt through your teeth. In CIC, the radar operator watched the track and tried not to blink. Intercept aircraft airborne, the controller called. The contact responded, not by running, by shifting. Its course slid sideways, as if it had sensed the new geometry of the fight, if you could call it a fight yet. Up above, the fighters cut through a ceiling of gray, skimming low where the horizon made small things hard to see. They ran quiet, no show of force, no unnecessary transmissions, closing to the point where the only truth would be what the pilot could see with his own eyes. Control, Talion 30. The lead pilot's voice was calm, but clipped, the sound of someone holding discipline against the unknown. The drone appeared as a speck, then a shape. Small airframe. No cockpit canopy. No exhaust plume. No markings that meant anything at this range. It flew like it belonged there. Steady altitude, smooth turns, corrections that looked algorithmic and intentional. Not a toy, not a bird, not debris caught in wind. The pilot eased closer, offset to the side, giving it space while keeping it boxed between the fighters and the open ocean. Rules of engagement stayed unspoken but heavy. Identify, shadow, control the airspace. Do not escalate without cause. In CIC, the supervisor watched the geometry update in real time. Fighters on station. Unknown contact still unclassified, still silent. Any payload visible? The supervisor asked. The pilot took a second pass. Careful, controlled, refusing to let adrenaline rewrite procedure. Negative visible stores. Still no markings. UAS appears. Purpose-built. That single word, purpose-built, landed harder than any missile warning tone because it meant capability without context. And capability without context was the exact problem a carrier could not afford near its hull. Seeing the drone should have brought relief. Instead, it sharpened the dilemma. If it was unarmed, it could still be scouting. If it was scouting, it could still be feeding targeting data to something over the horizon. If it was feeding targeting data, the most dangerous weapon might not be the drone itself, but what it was pointing at, the carrier from far beyond visual range. Inside CIC, the argument happened in the space between sentences. Shoot it down, and you create an incident over a platform that never fired. Let it linger, and you accept an unknown system inside your protective bubble, testing how close it can get before you act. The fighters held station, close enough to read panel seams, far enough to avoid a collision that could turn restraint into catastrophe. No warning shots, no aggressive passes, just controlled presence, pressure without provocation. The drone stayed silent. No lights, no broadcast, no signal that explained why it was there. Then it did something that made everyone in CIC straighten in their seats. It held a steady line, long enough to be seen, and long enough to be remembered. That was the message. Not an attack, a boundary test. Finally, the drone turned away, smooth and deliberate, angling back toward empty sky and sea. The fighters followed at a distance, shadowing until the contact faded, until sensors lost the return, until it became a story told in the language of timestamps and range rings. Only then did the carrier strike group exhale, because nothing had happened. No explosion, no engagement, no proof of hostile intent. And that absence was the point. Moments like this don't make headlines. They don't end in explosions. But they're the encounters that quietly rewrite how modern navies think about risk, restraint, and escalation. Aircraft carriers aren't defended by one weapon system. They're defended by certainty. Every return is categorized. Every aircraft is identified. Every movement is compared against patterns, civilian corridors, scheduled military flights, friendly routes, known profiles. That machinery of certainty is what keeps a high-value ship alive, because the carrier's true vulnerability isn't a lack of firepower. It's being forced to decide under ambiguity. Small drones weaponize that ambiguity. They don't need a runway. They don't need to announce themselves on civilian frequencies. They can be cheap enough to lose and quiet enough to slip close, and smart enough to matter. Near a carrier, time compresses. An unidentified object collapses decision windows and makes restraint feel risky and action feel irreversible. Shoot too early, and you transform uncertainty into escalation, an incident with consequences that travel far beyond the ocean you're standing on. Wait too long, and you teach the world that a carrier can be probed, measured, and pressured by platforms no one can name. That's why the fighters launched for a visual intercept. That's why they held station instead of firing. That's why restraint was treated as strength, not hesitation. Because the most dangerous outcome wasn't the drone's presence. It was the precedent of being provoked into force by something undefined. This encounter wasn't a battle. It was a warning delivered in silence. Proof that airspace can be violated without crossing the traditional threshold of war. And next time, the object may fly differently. Or there may be more than one. Or the approach may be faster, lower, smarter, designed to squeeze the decision clock until there's no room left to breathe. Because once an unknown drone closes on a US carrier, the Navy's clock starts ticking. If you want to understand how these moments actually unfold, before they become incidents, before they become conflicts, this is where we break them down.